imagine for a second, like you are standing in the middle of this totally chaotic, deafening battlefield.
Right, the air's so thick with dust you can't even see the person next to you.
Exactly. And suddenly, through all that haze, you see this volley of arrows flying directly towards someone you love.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Now, our deepest, most ingrained biological instinct, the one hardwired into our very DNA, is to duck, right? To protect ourselves.
Absolutely. I mean, it's just human nature to survive.
But what if instead of ducking, you actively raised your chest to catch those arrows?
I mean, to even consider doing that, you'd have to completely override every single survival mechanism human beings possess.
Right?
You aren't just making a tactical military decision in that moment. You are operating on this completely different psychological and spiritual plane.
And that level of absolute unbreakable devotion is exactly what we're getting into today. Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we are exploring the life of Prophet Muhammad, the legacy of the greatest man who ever lived.
It is such a profound topic.
It really is.
Yeah.
And we're zeroing in on a very specific, deeply emotional moment in this history, which is the Battle of Uhud. And we're doing this because, well, this deep dive is not merely an overview of historical military maneuvers.
Yeah, not at all.
Right. This is a profound look into the ultimate limits of human devotion, steadfastness, and spiritual sacrifice. Okay, let's unpack this, because we're looking at an event that tests the very core of human conviction, where every action is a testament to an unbreakable bond.
Yeah, when we analyze the historical accounts of Uhud, we are witnessing this intensely raw emotional spectrum. Like, we're going to look at staggering bravery, sure, but we're also going to examine deeply tragic missteps.
It's just so emotionally heavy.
It is. The goal here is to really understand the mechanics of that loyalty and that heartbreaking loss, because together they paint this legendary picture of what the early Muslims were truly made of.
Okay, so to set the scene, the battle is just beginning, right? And the prophet holds up a sword, but he doesn't just, like, hand it to his most skilled commander.
Right, he does something very specific.
Yeah, he holds it up to the crowd and asks, who will take this sword along with its rights?
And that phrase, with its rights, that is the key to understanding the entire mindset of this army.
What does that mean exactly? Like, the rights of a sword?
Well, the companions are eager, right? But that caveat makes them pause. They ask what the rights of this sword actually are. And the prophet explains that the right of this sword is to strike the enemy with it until the steel itself literally bends.
Oh, wow. Until the steel bends.
Yeah. He is asking for a level of commitment that goes way beyond standard warfare. He's looking for someone willing to push the absolute physical limits of the weapon.
Which implies completely exhausting their own physical limits too, right?
Exactly.
Which brings out this man named Abu Dujana. He steps up, accepts the challenge, and then he does something incredibly cinematic.
Oh, the red headband.
Yes. He pulls out a red headband, ties it around his head, and begins to just, like, strut proudly back and forth between the two armies.
It's a powerful image.
It is. Yeah. But here's where my modern mind gets a little tripped up. I always thought this specific spiritual tradition deeply disliked arrogance. Like, the ideal is to walk with humbleness, right?
It is, yeah. I mean, in almost every other context, walking with that kind of haughty pride is considered a major spiritual flaw.
Right.
The ideal is indeed to walk with firmness, but never arrogance. However, the historical sources explicitly note that in this exact context, like right on the battlefield, that specific proud strut was actually beloved.
Wait, really? Why the exception?
Because we have to look at the mechanism of psychological warfare here. Abu Dujana's strut wasn't about his personal ego, you know?
Oh, I see.
He wasn't showing off his own vanity. It was a calculated display of absolute confidence in their cause. He was projecting strength to defend his beliefs. He was turning his own body language into a psychological weapon against the opposing army.
And he completely backs up that body language, right? He just tears through the enemy ranks to fulfill that promise of bending the sword. But to really grasp the stakes of this initial clash, we need to look at what was happening on the other side of the field.
Yeah, specifically with the opposing army's standard bearers.
Right. Because here's where it gets really interesting. In modern times, we think of flags as just, like, symbols. A piece of fabric you salute during an anthem.
Exactly.
But think of the banner in a 7th century battle, like a modern military radio tower.
Oh, that's a great analogy.
Because in the absolute chaos and dust of ancient combat, you can't hear your commander's orders.
Yeah.
That flag is your only visual communication that the command structure still exists.
Right. If that radio tower goes down, the psychological anchor is completely gone.
Exactly.
The banner told every single soldier on that field, we are still in this fight. If you are fighting for your life and you glance over your shoulder and the banner is nowhere to be seen, well, the immediate assumption is that your leaders are dead and it's time to run.
Which is why the opposing commander put immense pressure on one specific family to hold that flag no matter the cost.
The Banu Abd ad-Dar family.
Yeah, and the cost is just staggering.
Yeah.
7 men from that family step up to hold the banner, and one by one, they are struck down. 7 of them.
It's brutal.
And when the last family member falls, a slave named Saab takes up the banner. And the sources say that even after his arms are severed in the fight,
Yeah, both of his arms.
he tries to hug the pole to his chest, asking with his dying breath if he has done his part.
It is a gruesome reality, definitely, but it illustrates a profound point. What's fascinating here is that even on the opposing side, you are seeing a clash of absolute defining loyalties. Warfare here wasn't merely physical, it was deeply ideological.
Right. But the mechanics of the battle dictate that once Saab falls, the banner finally stays on the ground. The visual radio tower is down.
And the opposing army sees this, their morale breaks, and they actually begin to flee.
So in that moment, the Muslims have won. The strategy worked.
They did, yeah.
But then that victory completely unravels because of a single, highly debated decision. And to understand it, we need to place you, the listener, right in the middle of the geography.
The archers on the hill.
Exactly. The Prophet had placed 50 archers on a strategic hill overlooking the battlefield, and his orders were not vague.
No, they were incredibly strict.
He said, "Do not move. Whether you see us winning or whether you see vultures picking at our dead bodies, do not come down until I give the direct order."
And the tactical brilliance of that placement was that it protected the rear flank of the Muslim army. As long as those archers held the high ground, the enemy cavalry couldn't sweep around behind them.
But here is where the human element completely disrupts the tactical brilliance. As the enemy retreats, the Muslims on the ground begin gathering the spoils of war, the booty.
Right.
Up on the hill, 40 of those 50 archers look down. Their immediate commander desperately tries to remind them of the strict orders, but 40 of them abandon their posts and run down the hill.
And we really need to examine the why here, because it's too simplistic to just label this as unchecked greed.
Right, it's more complicated than that.
We have to understand the socioeconomic reality of 7th century Arabia. If you're one of those archers standing on that hill, you aren't just seeing extra wealth down there. You are looking at vital resources.
You are looking at the economic security of your entire tribe.
Exactly. You are looking at the difference between your family starving or thriving in an incredibly harsh desert environment. From their perspective, the enemy was running away. The banner was down. The battle was, for all intents and purposes, over.
The threat was gone.
Right. So the psychological pull of securing those resources for their families became overwhelming.
So what does this all mean? Like, it's easy for us to sit here centuries later in our comfortable chairs and call it a mutiny. But in the heat of the moment, wasn't this just a profoundly human mistake? A moment where the desire for the now completely clouded the eternal mission.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it was undeniably a human mistake. But in the context of this specific theological worldview, letting that human desire override a direct, explicit prophetic command is the ultimate spiritual failure.
And the consequences are immediate.
Oh, instantly. The moment those 40 men leave the hill, the commander of the opposing cavalry spots the opening.
He sweeps his horses around the now undefended hill, outflanks the Muslims, and attacks from the rear.
And then the retreating enemy army sees the cavalry charge, they turn back around, and suddenly the Muslims are completely sandwiched.
The chaos is absolute.
And what makes this deep dive so fascinating is how the source text handles this exact moment of failure.
Oh, the Quranic revelation.
Yes. The revelation that descends following this event doesn't just record a military tactical error, it surgically exposes the inner dimension of the human soul. It states that among them were some who desired this world and some who desired the hereafter.
It lays their internal motivations completely bare.
It reframes the entire defeat. The text explains that this brutal reversal of fortune was actually a divine test meant to purify their hearts. It was a harsh but necessary mechanism to teach them that ultimate success requires absolute obedience to higher principles.
Principles that are far beyond any worldly material gains.
Exactly.
And that test of the heart reaches its absolute terrifying climax when the chaos zeroes in on the prophet himself.
Right, when the lines break.
The enemy breaks through the disorganized lines, and the historical details here are incredibly visceral. This isn't like some sanitized history.
No, it's very raw.
He is hit with a rock. His helmet is crushed into his head, his front teeth are broken, and his face is severely slashed.
The physical toll is immense, and there's a deeply moving detail in the aftermath regarding his medical care.
Right, with his daughter.
Yes, in the midst of the chaos, his daughter Fatima is trying to wash his facial wounds, and his cousin Ali is pouring water from a shield. But the water is actually counterproductive.
It's just making the bleeding worse, right?
Exactly, which leads to this brilliant moment of ancient battlefield ingenuity. Fatima takes a piece of a woven palm mat, sets it on fire, and then uses the hot ashes to pack directly into the deep wounds.
Wait, hot ashes? That sounds jarring to a modern ear. Isn't that an infection risk?
Well, the mechanism behind it is actually medically brilliant for the time.
Really?
Yeah, the dry carbon of the ash absorbs the moisture, stopping the immediate flow of blood, while the intense heat from the freshly burned material effectively cauterizes and disinfects the laceration.
Wow, that is incredible.
But even more profound than the physical medicine is the psychological and spiritual reaction of the prophet in that moment of intense pain.
Right, he is wiping the blood from his own face, looking at the people attacking him, and he asks out loud, how could any people prosper who struck their prophet and broke his front teeth while he called people to Allah?
And this is where a massive theological boundary is established. A divine revelation comes down, addressing that very question.
Saying it's not up to him.
Exactly. It explicitly tells him that the fate of these attackers is not up to him. It is entirely in God's hands, whether they are eventually punished or if they are forgiven and guided.
It's a striking reminder that even the greatest man who ever lived does not control human destiny. His duty is solely to deliver the message.
Absolutely.
Meanwhile, as he is bleeding on the battlefield, a terrifying rumor starts spreading like wildfire through the disorganized ranks. The rumor is that the prophet has been killed.
And as a listener, just try to imagine the psychological blow of that rumor. Your radio tower didn't just fall, the very connection to the divine message seems severed.
Right. And you see two completely different reactions from the Muslims, some totally panic.
Which is the standard biological reaction to extreme trauma.
Yeah, the defeat sinks right into their bones.
Yeah.
And they want to find an envoy to beg the enemy for a truce, just to save their own lives.
But then you have the reaction of the true believers, specifically a group known as the Ansar, the helpers from Medina.
Yes, one of these men is soaked in his own blood. And when a panicked soldier tells him the prophet is dead, his response is just legendary. He says, if he has been killed, then he must have fulfilled his mission. Let's die as he died, fighting for Islam.
That concept is known as Sabat, unshakable steadfastness.
To look at a barrage of arrows and actively raise your chest to catch them, well, I mean, it completely redefines the concept of loyalty.
It's the realization that even if they are battered and defeated on the physical battleground, that defeat cannot be allowed to penetrate their spirit. Their commitment to the core truth remains entirely intact.
And we see that Sabat manifests physically in the men who realize the rumor is false. They realize the prophet is still alive, and they rush through the chaos to become literal human shields for him.
Right, bringing us back to that visceral image we started with.
A companion named Abu Talha stands directly in front of the injured prophet. The prophet keeps trying to peek over his shoulder to see where the enemy arrows are coming from.
And Abu Talha actively raises his chest to its full height to block the view,
saying, may my father and mother be your ransom. No arrow will hit you. My chest will be in the way of yours.
And the historical accounts show he wasn't an isolated case. When the enemy surges forward, the prophet asks who will repel them. Young men volunteer one by one.
One steps forward, fights the surging crowd, and is killed.
Then another takes his exact place. And another. Until 7 young men die directly under the prophet's feet to protect him.
It transcends duty, it's ultimate unconditional love.
It is. And as the survivors finally manage to retreat up the rocky slopes of the mountain to a crevice where the heavy cavalry can't follow, that unbreakable spirit remains on full display.
Right, because the enemy commander, Abu Sufyan, comes to the base of the mountain and taunts them. He yells out, asking if the prophet is alive, asking if the top commanders are alive.
And when he gets no response, because they've been ordered to stay quiet. He assumes they are all dead. So he starts chanting for his idol, yelling, "Raise up Hubal."
And this is the turning point of morale. Despite being battered, bleeding, and having just suffered a devastating military defeat, the Prophet tells his companions they must respond to that specific taunt.
They chant back down the mountain, "Allah is higher and more glorious."
It's a powerful, resonant declaration that physical setbacks do not dictate the ultimate reality of their faith.
Which naturally draws our eyes to the devastating cost of the battle. As they stand on that mountain looking down at the field, they are looking at the bodies of 70 fallen Muslims.
The sources spend significant time honoring these 70 martyrs, and the underlying philosophy here is deeply moving. It's the belief that those who die for their faith are not truly dead.
Right, linguistically we use the word dead, but spiritually, within this tradition, that term is considered inaccurate. They are viewed as spiritually vibrant, alive in a different realm, and fully victorious.
Okay, let's unpack this, because you have men looking at fatal injuries and calling it the best death. It completely flips our modern survival instinct upside down. How do we even comprehend that?
Well, this raises an important question about what we truly value. The stories of these fallen individuals offer a fascinating look at the human psyche. Let's look at the Prophet's beloved uncle, Hamza.
He was a powerhouse, a legendary warrior.
But he wasn't killed in open combat. He was targeted by a slave named Washi.
And Washi didn't care about the ideological battle, right? He fought only to gain his freedom.
Exactly. He was offered his personal freedom by his master if he could assassinate Hamza. So he hid behind rocks, waited for the perfect moment, struck Hamza down with a javelin, and immediately walked away from the war.
And the tragedy is compounded because the enemy actually mutilates Hamza's body on the field. When the Prophet finds his uncle in that state, the grief is profound. It's recorded as one of the most painful moments in his entire life.
But what makes this history so rich is the psychological journey of Washi afterward. It's an incredible arc of redemption.
Wait, redemption after doing that?
Yeah. Years later, when the Muslims eventually conquer the region, Washi assumes he is a dead man. He is convinced he can never be forgiven, but he is told to seek the Prophet's boundless mercy.
So Washi converts. He embraces the very faith he fought against.
And the Prophet does accept his conversion and forgives him. But the human element here is just so authentic. The Prophet doesn't pretend the pain is gone. He simply asks Washi if he can avoid showing his face around him because seeing the man who killed his beloved uncle brings back too much grief.
That is just, wow. It perfectly captures the balance of divine forgiveness with authentic, unresolved human grief.
And Washi spends the rest of his life trying to balance those internal scales. Years later, he actually uses that exact same javelin to strike down a man who was falsely claiming to be prophet.
Oh, to atone for his sin.
Exactly. He believed that if he used that weapon to kill the best of men in his days of ignorance, he could perhaps erase that spiritual stain by using it to kill the worst of men later.
It's a powerful look at making amends. But returning to the field at Uhud, we have to talk about Mus'ab bin Umair. Before the message of Islam, this was a man who had immense wealth, the best clothes, the easiest life.
But he gave it all up for his faith. When he was killed at Uhud, he had nothing left to his name but a single, simple cloak.
And that cloak was so short that when they covered his head, his feet showed.
Right, and if they covered his feet, his head was bare. So the Prophet instructed them to cover his head with the cloak and to gather a local, fragrant desert plant to lay over his bare feet.
This specific detail raises a massive philosophical question about what we truly value.
It does. Years later, when the Muslim empire expanded and other companions had become incredibly wealthy, they would sometimes sit down to lavish meals, look at the food, and just weep.
Because they remembered Mus'ab.
Right. They were terrified that by experiencing comfort and wealth in this life, they were getting their reward early. They viewed Mus'ab, who died in absolute worldly poverty, as the truly successful one. His entire payment was guaranteed in full in the eternal hereafter.
That completely flips our modern, material-driven mindset upside down. And you see that same elevation of the eternal in the story of the lame elder, Amr bin al-Jamuh.
Oh, Amr. He had a severe physical limp, which meant he was legally entirely exempt from military service. Plus, his own son had already died as a martyr in a previous battle.
He had given enough. But Amr goes to the Prophet and begs to be allowed onto the battlefield. He says, I want to step this lame foot of mine into paradise.
And to comprehend that, we have to recognize the divine covenant these people believed they were participating in. They were not throwing their lives away in despair. They believed they were investing a temporary, flawed physical existence into something flawless and eternal.
It's a worldview where physical death is not the terrifying end we usually perceive it to be.
And that ultimately is the true, lasting legacy of the Battle of Uhud. It was not just a military clash, it was an intense emotional and spiritual crucible that forged the unbreakable spirit of the early Muslims.
It definitively demonstrated that true victory isn't always about holding the physical high ground. It's about holding the moral and spiritual high ground, even when you're forced to retreat up a mountain.
It showed that steadfastness, pure intentions, and unconditional love for the divine message can survive literally anything.
And that is a legacy that transcends 7th century history. It invites you, listening right now, to ask a very personal, very difficult question about your own life.
Because while the specific context we're discussing today is deeply historical and uniquely legendary, the core question applies to anyone.
Exactly. When the tides turn against you in your own life, when your visual anchor falls, and everything you've worked for seems lost in absolute chaos, what principles are you willing to stand by with that kind of unwavering steadfastness?
When the dust kicks up, are we looking at the immediate spoils on the ground in front of us, or are we keeping our eyes fixed on the eternal horizon?
So we'll leave you with this final provocative thought to mull over today. If our greatest trials and most painful defeats are often just mirrors reflecting what we truly love and desire deep down, well, what would your own moments of severe adversity reveal about the anchor of your heart? When the arrows start flying in your life, what is the truth that you would actively raise your chest to protect?